This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome back, listeners. You know how much we love digging into the unexpected sides of history. And today we're tackling something really interesting. The economics of World War II.
Really fascinating stuff.
And I gotta say, the research for this one, packed with surprises.
Absolutely. We always think about the battles, the generals, the strategies.
Right, the big picture stuff.
But the economic shifts during World War II
This is huge.
totally changed the world, not just for the war itself.
No, for decades after.
And what's really cool is it's not just a U.S. story.
Oh, definitely not.
We're diving into how Canada was impacted, too.
Some incredible stories there.
Not just numbers and dry facts, either.
Right.
We're talking about everyday people caught up in this economic whirlwind.
Absolutely. Factory workers, families, even Hollywood stars.
Okay, so
Yeah.
picture this. Early 1940s, the U.S. is still climbing out of the Great Depression,
Still recovering, yeah.
and bam! War breaks out in Europe.
Changes everything.
It's not just about getting back on their feet economically anymore.
No. It's about national survival.
Exactly, a complete shift in priorities.
And this is where President Roosevelt comes in with his famous Fireside chats.
Master communicator he was.
Basically tells America, this isn't just our soldiers' fight, it's all of ours.
Everyone had to contribute,
We all have a part to play.
and they did.
They really did. This was total war.
Everything focused on victory.
Factories that were making cars,
Yeah,
suddenly making tanks.
overnight, practically.
And it wasn't just a simple switcheroo.
Oh no, this was a huge undertaking.
Massive retooling, retraining workers.
Collaboration between the government and businesses on a scale never seen before.
Sets the stage for how we handle crises even today.
Public-private partnerships, all that.
Now, speaking of partnerships, got to talk about how this war effort was funded.
Huge sums of money involved.
Staggering. $341 billion the U.S. spent.
Wow, I can't even fathom that.
I know, even today, that's an astronomical amount.
It's more than a third of the entire U.S. economy back then.
So how did they manage it? Just jack up taxes?
Taxes did go up, but the real game changer was war bonds.
War bonds, right. Turning everyday Americans into investors.
Brilliant.
Instead of just paying more taxes, you could buy into the war effort.
And get your money back later with interest.
A patriotic investment.
Exactly. It raised over $185 billion.
Wow.
And more importantly, it made people feel directly involved.
They weren't just taxpayers, they were stakeholders.
Exactly. And the marketing. Genius.
Oh, yeah, those posters with Hollywood stars.
Clark Gable, Rita Hayworth.
Telling you buying a bond wasn't just patriotic.
It was a smart thing to do.
It worked. Over 85 million Americans bought war bonds.
That's like half the population at the time.
Crazy. Shows you the power of a good story, right?
Absolutely. How it can motivate people to take action.
But money was just one piece of the puzzle, right? With millions of men off fighting. Huge labor shortage back home.
Who was going to build all the tanks, the planes, the ships?
Exactly. And in Canada, this is where a guy named C.D. Howe steps in.
Video.
Nicknamed Minister of Everything.
Wow. What a title.
Because he was in charge of producing, well, pretty much everything.
Everything for the Canadian war effort.
I can just picture him running around making sure those factories kept humming.
From bombers to boots, Canada's industrial output just exploded under his watch.
Incredible. Went from mostly agriculture to a major industrial power.
Almost overnight.
And over here in the U.S., women stepped up in a big way.
Absolutely, filling those gaps in the workforce.
Taking on jobs that were seen as men's work before.
And this is where we get Rosie the Riveter, right?
Rosie the Riveter, the symbol of female empowerment.
Representing millions of women working in shipyards, factories.
Jobs they wouldn't have dreamed of before the war.
A massive societal shift.
Think about it. A housewife in the 1940s suddenly operating a welding torch.
Incredible.
Not just breaking the glass ceiling, shattering it.
It wasn't just symbolic either.
Right.
Over 6 million women joined the workforce in the U.S.
Essential to winning the war.
Absolutely. Changed how society viewed women forever.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Sadly.
Women still faced discrimination, earned less than men for the same work.
That's right. And it wasn't just women.
No, African Americans faced similar challenges.
New opportunities opened up, but prejudice and inequality persisted.
A reminder that even in times of national unity,
Yeah,
deep-seated biases can be hard to overcome.
very true. But this period also saw the beginnings of a push for more equality.
That's right, for both women and minorities.
1941, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 8802,
Banning discrimination in defense industries.
a huge step forward.
And this led to the Fair Employment Practices Committee, the FEPC,
Exactly, the first federal mechanism to address discriminatory hiring.
at least in war-related industries.
Right, and while its power was limited, it was a sign of things to come.
Laying the groundwork for the civil rights movement later on.
Yeah.
So much happening on a societal level alongside all these economic changes.
It's remarkable, and then you add the technological advances on top of that.
Oh yeah, wartime innovation was off the charts.
The government poured resources into research and development,
Especially anything that could help win the war.
leading to breakthroughs in electronics, medicine,
And of course, the Manhattan Project.
the atomic bomb. A turning point in history.
The dawn of the nuclear age. A whole new set of challenges and risks.
The bomb casts a long shadow, but let's not forget the other innovations that came out of the war.
Oh, for sure. Radar, jet engines, synthetic materials like nylon.
Nylon. Hard to imagine life without it now.
It all came from wartime research, driven by necessity.
Amazing how that works.
And speaking of innovation, we can't forget the impact on global finance.
That's right. The U.S. emerges from the war as a global economic superpower.
And the way we do business globally today. Largely shaped by decisions made in this era.
Like the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. A pivotal moment, establishing the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Which it still is today.
It's incredible.
So basically, Bretton Woods meant other countries pegged their currencies to the dollar,
Which was linked to the price of gold,
creating a system of fixed exchange rates
aimed at stabilizing the global economy.
and facilitating international trade.
A bold move with a lasting impact on global finance.
This is also where the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are created.
The IMF and the World Bank.
Major players in the global economy still today.
Born out of the ashes of World War II.
It's pretty amazing.
The IMF meant to provide short-term loans to countries facing financial problems.
Helping to stabilize those exchange rates, prevent crises.
And the World Bank. Loans for reconstruction and development.
First for rebuilding Europe, then tackling poverty and development globally.
An ambitious undertaking and remarkably successful in shaping the post-war world.
Really highlights how interconnected we all are.
Definitely.
Events in one part of the world have ripple effects everywhere.
And it makes you wonder,
What about our current global challenges?
will they lead to similar shifts? Only time will tell.
Lots to think about. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's zoom in on the US and Canada specifically.
Good idea.
They both went through massive changes, but their paths were distinct.
They were.
And looking at those differences, we get insights into how national identity and economic priorities,
All come together?
especially during a crisis.
Absolutely.
So buckle up, listeners,
We're about to take a deep dive.
into the nitty-gritty of the U.S. and Canadian wartime economies.
You never know, we might even find a few more ministers of everything along the way.
That would be awesome. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so the U.S. comes out of the war, this economic superpower,
Right. Industry's booming, stable currency.
ready to help rebuild Europe,
And that's what they did. The Marshall Plan.
named after Secretary of State George Marshall.
Billions of dollars poured into rebuilding those economies.
Crazy to think how much that one program shaped things.
It did.
Helped stop the spread of communism.
Yeah.
Boosted international trade.
Solidify the U.S. as a global leader.
Smart move all around, right?
Mhm.
Humanitarian and strategic.
Absolutely. Created new markets for American goods, too.
Win-win.
Definitely.
But let's back up a bit, look at what was happening inside the U.S. during the war.
Okay.
One thing that's striking is the level of government control.
Unprecedented, really.
The government was basically running the show,
Directing resources, setting prices.
telling companies what to produce.
It was a command economy, essentially.
Now, some people say that stifles innovation,
The free market argument.
but it's hard to argue with the results.
Growth was incredible. Unemployment plummeted.
Millions of new jobs.
People working overtime.
But that boom came with sacrifices.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Rationing.
Rationing was a fact of life.
Food, gas, clothing, metal, all rationed.
Making sure enough resources went to the war effort.
And then there's inflation.
With so much money flowing around,
Consumer goods in short supply.
prices were bound to go up.
It's interesting how the government tried to manage that.
They did.
Price controls, campaigns, urging people to save, buy war bonds.
Instead of spending on scarce goods.
It was a huge effort to manage the economy and public behavior.
Social engineering on a grand scale.
And it needed people to cooperate.
It did, and they did.
Amazing how quickly Americans adapted. Victory gardens, carpooling, walking more.
A real sense of shared sacrifice, community spirit.
All culled together.
And that spirit extended beyond the U.S.
Right. To Canada.
Canada played a crucial role.
Supplying food, raw materials.
Their factories producing tons of equipment.
Tanks, bombers, the whole works.
And Canadian soldiers fighting alongside Americans and Brits.
Absolutely essential to the Allied victory.
And they paid a price, too. Thousands of lives lost.
Their economy was also reshaped by the war.
Definitely.
It's interesting to compare the U.S. and Canadian experiences.
They are different.
U.S. economy comes out stronger than ever. But Canada faces challenges adjusting to peacetime.
Demobilizing the military.
Reintegrating soldiers back into civilian life.
Not easy.
But just like the U.S., Canada emerged with a stronger national identity.
Forged in the fires of war.
And that bond between the two countries, even stronger.
Closer cooperation on all fronts.
And that's reflected in how they tackled rebuilding the global economy.
Absolutely. The Bretton Woods Agreement.
A joint effort, U.S., Canada, other allies.
A remarkable achievement.
Laid the foundation for decades of growth and prosperity.
It did.
But even the best laid plans, right?
Things change.
The Bretton Woods system ran into trouble in the 70s.
Those fixed exchange rates
became too rigid for a more complex global economy.
The system eventually collapsed.
But that doesn't diminish what they achieve.
So?
They were trying to build a better world after a horrific war.
Out of the ashes.
And their efforts had a huge impact, a lasting legacy.
They did. And the lessons learned.
From their successes and their failures.
Still relevant today.
As we face new challenges, a rapidly changing world.
That's true.
It's a great reminder that history isn't just the past.
No, it's about understanding the forces that shape our present and future.
That's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive.
Connecting the dots, uncovering hidden patterns.
Seeing how the past informs the present and shapes what's to come.
And hopefully inspiring our listeners to think critically.
Ask questions, challenge assumptions.
Dig deeper.
Because those hidden stories, those individual experiences...
They're what make history come alive.
They remind us that even the biggest events are driven by people.
Their choices, their sacrifices, their dreams.
And those stories woven together, that's the tapestry of history.
Complex, ever-evolving.
Unfolding around us every day.
It is.
So next time you see a headline, hear a debate, think about the historical forces at play.
That long arc of history.
We're all part of a much bigger story.
We are.
A story that's been unfolding for generations.
Exactly.
And remember, history doesn't just happen.
We make it.
Every choice, every action, every voice shapes the narrative.
Make yours count.
Powerful stuff. That's the heart of the deep dive.
It is. We're not just here to entertain.
We want to empower.
Inspire you to engage with the world in a more thoughtful way.
Informed, critically.
And to remember that even in tough times,
there's always hope.
There's potential for progress.
And we all have the chance to make a difference.
So keep those brains buzzing, stay curious.
Explore the world with open minds.
And that thirst for knowledge.
Absolutely.
What really struck you about this deep dive?
Honestly, the scale of the transformation during the war.
Me too. It's mind-boggling.
How those industries shifted, the workforce mobilized, the government's role.
It's just incredible.
It speaks to the adaptability, the ingenuity of the U.S. and Canada.
And a reminder that even in the darkest times,
humans can achieve amazing things.
Innovation, collaboration.
Inspiring.
And it's not just the big picture.
Yeah.
Those individual stories of sacrifice, resilience.
It's just as powerful.
Like the women who joined the workforce, proving they could do anything. Or the people buying war bonds, rationing, planting gardens.
All contributing to the effort.
Small actions, big impact.
Especially when we work together.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder what we could achieve today.
If we could recapture that spirit.
That unity, that determination.
It's a great question.
One we'll all be thinking about long after this.
I hope so.
Wow. It's incredible to think how much the world transformed during and after World War II.
Truly a pivotal time in history.
From the Depression to an economic powerhouse, Rosie the Riveter, the Bretton Woods Agreement.
Tanks to the atomic age.
So much changed.
It really shows how much we take for granted today comes from that era.
The technologies, the institutions, Even the structure of the global economy.
It's all connected to those years.
Makes you appreciate how interconnected everything is.
Definitely.
Decisions made back then still shape our world today.
For better or worse.
And that's why understanding history is so important.
Not just memorizing facts and dates.
Right. It's about seeing the story, the narrative.
That helps us make sense of now and navigate the future.
That's what we try to do here on the Deep Dive.
Looking back to look ahead, connecting the dots.
Finding those hidden patterns that show how the past shapes us.
And hopefully getting our listeners to do the same.
Ask those questions, challenge assumptions.
Dig a little deeper.
Because those hidden stories, those individual experiences...
They're what make history real,
Yeah, they remind us that even the biggest events...
Wars, economic shifts...
They're all driven by people.
By their choices, their sacrifices.
Their dreams, their aspirations.
It's those individual stories woven together that create the big picture.
That tapestry of history.
Complex and always changing, unfolding every day.
So next time you see a news headline or hear a debate, think about what led up to that moment.
Those historical forces at play.
Remember that we're all part of something much bigger.
A story that's been going on for generations.
And we don't just watch it happen.
We make it happen.
Our choices, actions, our voices all shape that narrative.
So make yours count.
That's a great way to put it. A powerful message.
It's at the heart of what we do here.
We're not just trying to entertain. We want to empower you.
That's right.
To engage with the world in a more thoughtful, informed way.
And even amidst all the uncertainty and chaos.
Yeah.
To remember that there's always hope.
Always the potential for progress.
And the opportunity to make a difference.
Keep those brains buzzing, folks.
Stay curious.
Keep exploring with open minds.
And never lose that thirst for knowledge.
So what really stood out to you from this deep dive?
For me, it's the sheer scale of transformation during the war.
Absolutely. It's mind-blowing.
The way industries were completely retooled.
Millions of people entering the workforce.
The government taking on a role it never had before.
It's awe-inspiring, really.
It shows what's possible when people come together.
That adaptability, that ingenuity.
Even in the darkest times, humans can achieve incredible things.
And it's not just the big picture stuff either.
No, not at all.
Yeah. It's those individual stories, the sacrifices, the resilience.
Those are what stick with you.
The women who stepped up, proving they could do it all.
People sacrificing their comforts, buying war bonds, rationing.
Planting those victory gardens.
It all added up.
Shows how small actions can have a huge impact.
Especially when we're united towards a common goal.
It makes you wonder what we could achieve today.
If we could tap into that same spirit.
That unity, that determination.
Something to think about.
Definitely something we'll all be pondering.
For a long time to come.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive into the economics of World War II.
It's been a fascinating journey.
The big thank you to our expert for sharing their insights and expertise.
My pleasure.
And of course, a huge thank you to all of you for listening.
We appreciate your support.
Remember to check out the show notes for more information and resources.
And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic from the annals of history.
Until then, keep exploring.
Stay curious and keep learning.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.